Hello again everyone and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you today. Let's do it. Have you ever seen someone die? What happened? Please remember to like, share, hype, and subscribe. I'm a firefighter paramedic, seen plenty of people die, but one sticks with me. We went to a medical call for a patient who was actively dying. He was a terminal lung cancer patient at the end of his life. The family said they had a do not resuscitate order, which means we can let him die in peace without doing all the paramedic things, but they can't find the paper. So I tell them to find it, or I'm going to have to do things that I know this guy doesn't want done. CPR, intubation, vent, and invasive things that will ultimately slightly prolong his life, invade his body, and not change the eventual outcome. So I do the things I have to do, but as slow as I can justify. One of those things is to attach an EKG monitor to his heart, and there's a pulse and a heartbeat when I do. And then it changes it to VFib. This heart rhythm is lethal unless I shock it like in the movies, and my monitor is programmed to alarm and print out a record when it detects it. And rightly so, because this is the beginning of death and something needs done right now. As part of the alarm process, the monitor automatically starts printing. I get ready to start the cardiac arrest protocol that nobody in the room wants started when the family at last produces the DNR paper, and I can now legally let the person die and not do anything. We do our paperwork and console, preserve dignity, and the other things we do. But the monitor has still been printing, and the strip shows a pulsing rhythm that gets wide and irregular as the heart gets hypoxic, then VFib that starts coarse and gets finer and finer until the mechanical and electrical activity both stop and there is a astolic flatline. I've captured a print of the moment his heart went from something to nothing, and for some reason, this particular guy stuck with me. I've seen plenty of death and had plenty of people die in my presence, but this one is the most memorable. I kept that printout for a long time, physically, and mentally I still have it. Here 1 minute, and gone the next. I worked in tech support for a large computer company, and the guy next to me just fell out of his chair dead. One guy immediately jumped on him and started doing CPR, and someone else ran and got the emergency defibrillator. I just sat there kind of in shock, watching them go through the process until the paramedics finally arrived and took him away in an ambulance. They were never able to get his heart to restart. The thing that messed me up the most was just knowing how much this guy hated his job. I kept wondering if there was a moment of disappointment, as if it was happening, where he realized that's how he was going to go. The whole immediate family was there when they took my ex-wife's dad off life support, leukemia. People don't just die immediately when they do that. It took maybe 45 minutes to an hour before the doctor called the time. The death rattle was the most unsettling thing about it. I watched my brother die in hospital of cancer. He was 22 and I was 19. He was holding the bed rail so tightly, and then I saw his hand relax. I was happy until I realized that meant he passed. I then broke down in tears, even though I knew he was finally pain-free. I was still in denial that this was the end. I was lying by my mom's side holding her hand when she died. As someone said to me, she was the first person to hold my hand when I came into this world, and I was the last person to hold hers when she left it. I feel profoundly grateful that my mom had a very quick death. The oncologist reckoned maybe 10 weeks, but it was 10 days. It was like she basically switched herself off, so she was completely compos mentis to the end, and it wasn't harrowing watching her die a slow and painful death, which I know is very much not the case for many, many end-of-life patients. I actually weirdly have happy memories of her final days, because we said all the things that needed to be said, and she wasn't suffering. She wanted to die at home, and we knew things were getting more imminent, so my brother and dad and her closest friend lay with her, sat with her, in my parents' bedroom. She was hilarious, as she was obviously fading, but opened her eyes and asked my dad who was here, and said, "Oh, it'll be a shame if I don't go tonight, and you'll all be gathering here waiting." Then, maybe half an hour later, eyes opened again and went, still here. We all fell about laughing. She was my brilliant, funny, loving mother, until literally the very end. I remember lying with her and stroking her hair and telling her she was going to be with her mom soon, and it was okay to go. It was a privilege to be there. She was far too young to die at 62, but I'm so grateful she had such a good death. I was in the step-down ICU with necrotizing pancreatitis and a huge double infection in my abdomen. My roommate was supposed to be discharged to hospice within a couple of days. She didn't make it to a discharge date. She died holding her daughter's hand. I heard her daughter cry out for her mother. It was pretty rough. They transported me to my own room after that for the rest of my stay. Yeah, my grandma asked my parents if it would be okay to spend her last days in her house. It was a humbling experience, especially being 19. I would stay up late listening to her breathing until it just stopped, and then she would start to breathe again. The day she died, hospice came, but only one person did, so my dad, the nurse, and I had to carry her out. I still think about her often, and how I wish I had said more to her, but she knows I love her, and she's the best granny I could ever have had. Quite often, but I work in emergency medicine, death is a common part of life. Western culture has just built this little curtain in front of it so people can pretend it isn't there. Personally, I don't think the curtain should exist. I think if more people actually saw the consequences of bad decisions like driving drunk or on a cell phone, treating their guns like toys, or smoking and never exercising, they may live healthier, more responsible lives, but hey, here we are. I saw a guy have what I assumed was a heart attack. He fell onto the sidewalk. Paramedics were called, but could not revive him. It's really striking when someone goes from alive to not there. When I was a kid, my friend's dad was driving us home from a movie when a speeding car, around 90 in a 25, hit a 20-year-old on a bicycle. He bled out on the street. My friend's dad checked on him, but the guy's injuries were too severe. I was young enough that 20 seemed old to me. I was working closing shifts and didn't have a car. Normally, I'd ride a bicycle to work, and back my bike was having issues with its chain, so my friend gave me a ride to work and picked me up one night on the way home. We had just passed through an intersection that was always poorly lit. About 20 feet past the intersection, there was a drunk guy dressed in all black in the middle of the road. We didn't see him until he was in the windshield. Friend hit the brakes. Guy rolled off the car and onto the street, while my friend sat in the car calling the cops. I got out to check on the dude. Immediately got hit with a strong smell of booze. Guy was out cold, snore gasping for air. Both his legs were broke backwards at the knees, and there was a pool of blood at his head. There was an ambulance on scene quick. Cops showed up. They did some sobriety tests on my friend because he was driving. We wound up having to wait on the scene for like 3 hours until a detective showed up. What really shocked me was how unserious the cops were about the whole thing. They seemed to know the guy who got hit. They were joking about someone winning a contest about the drunk guy being hit. When the detective finally showed up, he told us the guy had died en route to the hospital. They didn't charge my friend with anything and let us go. I'll never forget that snoring, gasping sound the guy was making. December 31st, 1999, massive crowd in the streets of Las Vegas. We were right in front of the Paris balloon. The entire strip was just a sea of people, maybe 10 minutes before the millennium ended. Some people were climbing those massive traffic lights, crawling out on them and setting off fireworks. This one dude did it, stood up, grabbed some overhead wires to balance himself. He was either electrocuted right then and there, or shocked and then fell to his death. I happened to be filming on an old Hi-8 camcorder. He fell to the street. A bunch of people were around. Medical couldn't get to him. He died. About 8 years later, I was in a bookstore and saw one of those Darwin Award books. I was flipping through it and happened to see that very story listed. The book said he got electrocuted, so perhaps that's what killed him, but we definitely didn't see sparks or anything. Does my dog count? Well, just in case, he was 10 years old and we found out that he had aggressive cancer. We discussed surgery, and the vet was very honest that at most it would buy him a few months, but he would be in pain. So I made the decision to put him to sleep. I sang to him and held him and told him it was okay to go and that I loved him. Then he was gone. Miss you every day, buddy. Countless times. The only ones that stick with me are the kids. I held a little girl's hand while her brain bled out internally. She fell off of a curb and landed headfirst on pavement. She was so scared. I cried with her while waiting for the ambulance and EMTs. I promised her she'd be alright. She passed that evening. All the shit I saw working in law enforcement, I can still see her scared face. It was summer of 2012. It still feels like it happened yesterday. Tough stuff today indeed. This is not an easy topic, and even though these stories could be older or newer, I'm grateful for them, and to see that so many people treat it with dignity and respect, and that some of these people got to go out on their own terms. End of life is always a mystery to all of us, and it always will be. But to be there with love and compassion is what matters most. Yes, I worked as a lifeguard for a couple of summers at a famous dangerous beach. I've seen plenty of stuff and 2 deaths, but I will only explain the one because that one hit me the most. It was September on a very bad day, and we had a red flag, no swimming allowed. A guy came up to me and said if he can swim, and I said, even if you are Michael Phelps, no one is swimming today. 10 minutes later, he goes off to the side, as further away from me as he can, and he starts swimming. I wasn't sure if I could swim at this sea, but some guys tied me up with a rope, and I went anyway, because he wasn't very far, and I could see that he was struggling. When I got there, he was already face down, and I signaled the others to start pulling. When we got out, he wasn't breathing, and the ambulance was 30 minutes late. We did all the procedures, but he didn't make it. I still think about it to this day from time to time, but I did what I could. Saw a boy from my cousin's first grade class after he got hit by a bus during morning traffic. The bus was still on top of him when I noticed the commotion, and his eyes were open but empty. I was in 5th grade myself, and walking my younger sister and cousins to school as the eldest, so before they could properly look at him, I told them to move along. It was fine. He was fine. We'd see him later, and we'd better hurry if we don't want to miss the bell. I knew the situation was bad, but apparently I was so calm and casual at the moment that they trusted what I said and didn't find out the truth until the next day. It made all the difference for that not becoming the most dramatic event of their then young lives, though I probably did myself a disservice in the process. Yes, my fiancée about 5 years ago. She'd been sick for a few days, but I thought it was just a bad cold. Lasted a bit longer and coughing was a bit too violent, so we went to the doctor. Diagnosed pneumonia and gave her some drugs, then sent her home. The night we got back, she woke up in a panic, signaling me to call an ambulance. She could barely breathe. The paramedics arrived and sat her up in bed. but she was struggling to stay up, so I got behind her and supported her back. As I was holding her and the paramedics were trying to get vitals on her, I felt her struggling suddenly stop, and she went completely limp. I not only watched her die, but felt her take her last agonizing breath while I held her. Later, they found she died of a DVT, deep vein thrombosis. I'm a paramedic of 10 plus years. I've seen dozens of dead bodies and worked countless cardiac arrests. Usually when I arrive, they are already in cardiac arrest, or I manage to keep them from going that far. I can count on one hand how many had been conscious when I got there, then died. It's always harder. The most recent one was a couple weeks ago. The guy was in a cardiogenic shock, gray, sweaty, gasping, but able to converse. I gave him O2 and he perked up. We got about 15 to 20 minutes to build a report. We were exchanging a few jokes up until we moved him into the carry chair to get to the ambulance, and that was it. Within 30 seconds, he was on the floor, and we were breaking ribs. We worked for 2 hours to no avail. Another was when I first qualified. The guy was having a STEMI heart attack. I gave him all the drugs, and he felt better. We got about 5 minutes from the hospital, and I see his ECG make some drastic changes. I asked if he was okay, and he said, "Yep, a whole lot better after all that stuff you gave me." Then he went quiet, and he went into ventricular fibrillation. I tore open his shirt, slapped some pads on, dumped 150 joules into him, and did a round of compressions before he started moaning. Before my paperwork was done, he had gotten a stent or 3 fitted and was upstairs on the ward with a cup of tea, nursing a couple sore ribs. Was on the balcony eating dinner, watched a guy who was walking down the street on the other side from my building, looked down to take a bite, look back up, and he's face down on the sidewalk. See a stream of blood coming from his face as I'm dialing 911. Must have had a massive heart attack or stroke. Ambulance came and took him away. It was obvious he was dead. Twice. The first was a woman I encountered in jail. She was brought in strapped to a gurney and placed in a suicide watch cell. She had clearly been pepper sprayed. Sometime later that day, she didn't respond to the guard checking on her and was found to be unconscious. She was moved out into the hall and CPR started. When the medical showed up, she was shocked twice and then wheeled out on a gurney. I don't know if they got a pulse back or not, but they didn't seem in a huge hurry when they took her out. The second was my grandfather in hospice, cancer. I held my grandmother's hand as she passed away in hospice. It was weird. Pretty well the entire family was there with her, but my entire focus was locked in on her, as if no one else was around. I heard my mom and aunts tell her it was okay to go. Then I saw the light leave her eyes. 1 second she was there, and the next she wasn't. I was 18, and it was the most devastating day of my life. I was so emotional that I had to run to the bathroom and throw up. Despite that, and the emptiness that followed, I wouldn't ever change a thing about having been there to hold her hand one final time. Well, I don't like getting all in my feels, but I lost my youngest daughter to suicide. It all started back in July of '93. I came home for lunch one day. I usually don't come home for lunch. I made an exception that day. I remembered that I went to the deli that day before and I picked up some pastrami and fresh mozzarella. I wanted to make me a sandwich, instead of asking my lovely wife to make it for me when I got off work. I hit the garage door opener and my garage door is starting to open up. I'm in my driveway waiting for it to open up completely. Well, it finally is open up all the way. What do I see as I head more into my garage? My daughter is hanging from the ceiling. I hit my brakes, jump out, and run toward her body. Her body is motionless. I managed to cut her down. You see, I'm a rather tall gentleman. I stand 6'11" flat-footed. I get cut down, and I have my daughter laying in my garage. I'm kneeling down. I check for a pulse. There's a faint pulse. I call 911 on speaker and start CPR as the operator directs the ambulance to my residence. I am unsuccessful with trying to bring my daughter back to life. The paramedics try for an additional 15 minutes, plus they tried and shocking her back. Nothing. After another minute or so, I knelt down and grabbed my daughter's hand and said my goodbyes. At some point I called my wife at work. I then gave her the awful news. That is all for now. I'm going to close for now.